This episode is brought to you by ADT. Mysteries are always fun to unravel, but not when it comes to your home security. Luckily, there's ADT. They now professionally install Google Nest products with their smart home security, which means plenty of smart devices to help you protect what matters most. Because ADT believes the smarter the home, the safer the security. To see how ADT can help make your home smarter and safer, visit ADT.com.
This podcast contains adult themes and language, and some of the things that we discuss may be disturbing to some listeners. In this podcast, we discuss sexual assault, torture, race, and murder. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to Fruitloops, episode 170. Bienvenidos, bitches, and buiti binafi, and thank you for listening.
Yeah.
Fruitloops is a podcast about true crimes committed by people of color and the victims that we don't hear or know much about. Contrary to popular belief, not all serial killers are straight, cisgender, able-bodied white dudes.
What?
No. There are many well-documented cases of serial killers of color, and Fruitloops is a podcast all about them. We will take deep dives into the fascinating lives and crimes of serial killers and true crimes committed by people of color and the victims that the media and entertainment commonly leave out because you're not going to believe this. The news is racist, allegedly.
And we are Wendy and Beth. She's Wendy, a Black Latinx woman, and I'm Beth, and I just happen to be white.
It's not her fault. We love her anyway. It's okay, friend.
We're not journalists, investigators, or psychologists, just a couple of gals interested in true crime. Also, the opinions expressed in this podcast are just that, our opinions. Please send any questions or comments to fruitloopspod@gmail.com or leave us a voicemail at 602-935-6294.
Yeah.
Wow. And we may feature it on a future episode.
Also, our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use fruitloopspod for all our social media. The footnotes for each episode can be found on our website. Plus, check it out for the different ways that you can support the show and become a Fruit Loops patron on Patreon. You can also support us by supporting our sponsors.
Yeah.
If you can't help monetarily, no problem. Just give us one of them old 5-star reviews.
Yeah,
5 stars.
Do it.
Yeah. So, what are we talking about today, Beth?
So today we're talking about Sheila Davalloo, an Iranian-American woman convicted in 2004 of the attempted murder of her husband. She was also later convicted of first-degree murder in the stabbing death of a romantic rival, and it is wild.
Oh, yes. This one made me go record scratch.
Yeah.
I need to find that sound effect. Yeah.
She's not what you would typically think of when you think of a serial killer, but she committed and attempted to commit more than one murder. So here we are.
Here we go. But before we get into it, how you doing?
I'm good, and I'm excited to cover this case because it's right up my alley. I love these kinds of cases.
Oh my God, I can hear it in your voice. Oh, I'm excited. Let's do it.
Let's get to the drama.
Okay, well, let's get into some listener letters.
Hello, angels. Thank you.
What is in that bag, Beth?
Well, we got an email from Zeke who said,
Oh, yeah?
I recently listened to your Cannibals of Color 2 episode. Sorry, I'm extremely far behind. And I have to say to Zeke, don't be sorry. We're just glad you're listening.
Boo.
Yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, he goes on to say, at the end, you mentioned that cannibalism itself isn't illegal and asked for help with clarification. I'm not sure if you've gotten a response or looked it up yourself. We haven't. But cannibalism itself is actually legal in 49 states. The only state that has specific laws about consuming anything human is Idaho. And he says it's not surprising that there's only one, considering it's not uncommon practice to eat placentas and the like, which would fall under that law. And that makes sense. I didn't even think of that.
Didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. What laws are in place are all indirect, such as murder and desecration of a corpse. There's also the National Organ Transplant Act of 1984 that prohibits the buying and selling of organs that are viable for transplantation.
Oh man, my plans next week are ruined. Just kidding.
Bummer. There are several smaller laws that I haven't mentioned that you'd have to work around, but theoretically, under the right circumstances, if the person is alive and willingly gives you a body part that isn't usable for a transplant, you could legally eat it in 49 states without any legal repercussions.
Oh my God, a hip hop air horns for that email. You know what, Zeke? Oh my gosh. I want to give you a virtual hug. I love that. That's the kind of fact. When I say don't fact check me, this is not what I mean.
This is a good fact check.
Amazing. Yes. Thank you, Zeke.
But I think I'm going to pass on eating body parts.
Okay. I mean, I really like the part that he said under the right circumstances with consent.
Yes.
With consent, right?
Yes.
So thank you so much for that clarification. Okay, you do you, boo. All right. Well, now we're going to take a quick break and get into the story when we come back. All right, we are back.
All right.
Oh, hello. I'm supposed to say something.
Yes.
Remind us, Beth, who is our subject today?
Today we're talking about Sheila Davalloo, an Iranian-American woman who murdered a woman and attempted to murder her husband. Woo!
Oh, right. Let's get wow. He had it coming. Just kidding. No,
he did not.
He did not. So now we're going to get into some stats. All right. Now, Miss Davalloo had one murder victim. Rest in power to Ana Lisa Raimundo. Rest in power, Queen. The MO is an apparent love triangle that collapsed, and the weapon she used was a knife. The first crime took place in November 2002, and then the next one took place in 2003. But that crime wasn't a murder. Anyway, she had a second victim that she attempted to murder, but we'll get into that in the story.
Yeah.
And we are going to start with the setting and Davalloo's early life because context matters.
Yeah.
So haters, bye. Anyway, let's get into the setting. Take us there, Beth.
Our subject today was born in Iran, and there is a lot of history here. And we'll
Holy moly.
Yeah. Tons of history.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When I was researching the Iran part, I was like, oh, but there's this. Oh,
I know. It was really hard.
God. And then the section was so long.
Yeah. It was really hard to pull out what we wanted to. I mean, there was just so much interesting information. So we did our best to summarize and touch on some of the highlights and the things that we found really interesting. Here we go.
Okay.
Iran is a mountainous, arid, and ethnically diverse country on the southwestern side of the Asian continent. Much of Iran consists of a central desert plateau, which is ringed on all sides by mountain ranges. Most of the population lives on the edges of the desert.
The capital is Tehran, located at the southern foot of the Elburz Mountains. Along with Tehran, cities such as Isfahan Esfahan and Shiraz combine modern buildings with important landmarks from the past and serve as major centers of education, culture, and commerce. Iran's rich petroleum reserves account for about 1/10 of the world reserves and are the basis of its economy.
Because of its strategic position and abundant natural resources, Iran has long played an important role in the region. Traditionally known as Persia, Iran has been influenced by waves of indigenous and foreign conquerors and immigrants for centuries.
Wow.
Human habitation in Iran dates back some 100,000 years ago, but recorded history began with the Elamites circa 3000 BCE. That is a long time ago.
That's really rad. Yeah. Wow. So, in other words, they're not new to this.
No, they've been there for a really long
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
So various Muslim dynasties ruled beginning in the 7th century. In 1501, the Safavid dynasty was established, one of the longest-running empires of Iranian history, lasting from 1501 to 1736. In the early 16th century, the Safavids introduced Twelver Shi'ism as the official religion, now the largest branch of Shia Islam.
With the fall of the Safavids in 1736, rule passed into the hands of several short-lived dynasties, leading to the rise of the Qajar dynasty in 1796. Qajar rule was marked by the growing influence of European powers in Iran's internal affairs, with economic and political difficulties, and by the growing power of the Shia clergy in social and political issues.
The country's difficulties led to the ascent in 1925 of the Pahlavi line. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi became the Shah in 1941. Shah is from the Persian royal title meaning king or emperor. He allied himself with the West in order to transform Iran into a modern power. But while he modernized the country, he forcefully suppressed dissent and political freedoms. Uh-oh.
The 1953 Iranian coup d'etat on August 19th, 1953.
Coup d'etat, you mean? What Dr. Oz was trying to make in that video?
Yes, coup d'etats. Yes. It was the overthrow of the democratically elected Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh in favor of strengthening the monarchical rule of the Shah. It was orchestrated by the United States under the name Operation Ajax and the United Kingdom under the name Operation Boot.
Oh, I did not know that. Mohammad Mossadegh served as the 35th Prime Minister of Iran, but was Iran's first democratically elected Prime Minister. He was a beloved figure in Iran. During his tenure, his administration introduced a range of social and economic policies such as social security, land reforms, but the most significant was the nationalization of the Iranian oil industry.
Iran had a lot of oil, which was discovered there in 1908. The British, of course, wanted it.
Aha, that's mine.
Yeah,
I'm white.
I want that.
It's mine. Yes.
Believing that Iran's natural resource was essential to Britain's future, a deal was struck between Iran and England that gave the British 80% to 90% of the profits, and Iran got the rest.
Now, wait a minute here. That doesn't make any fucking sense. Now, if you're thinking that's a bad deal, well, you are right. But at the time, Iran needed the money. The company that controlled all that oil was called the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. And now it's called British Petroleum. Fuck you, BP.
Great Britain controlled Iran's oil for decades, and Mossadegh sought to change the terms of the deal. But after months of unfruitful talks, he broke off negotiations and denied the British any further involvement in Iran's oil industry.
All right. No, Britain didn't like that. Oh,
What?
no. Oh, you mad? You want to argue? So they wanted to get rid of Mossadegh to put in a more favorable government. To the British and the U.S., Mossadegh seemed unruly and unreasonable, which are terms that white people use to describe brown people that they don't like.
Yeah.
So if you ask me, that's racist.
Yeah.
But to Iranians, he was a figure who believed in democracy and was a balance to maniacal power. I'm just kidding.
Monarchical.
Monarchical. Oh my God. Thanks, smart friend. Monarchical power.
It is a weird word.
Yeah.
The British appealed to the United States for help. At first, they said no, but changed their position after the Eisenhower administration entered office in early 1953. With Eisenhower as president, the U.S. and the U.K. agreed to work together toward Mossadegh's removal.
They're doing dirty.
Yep.
Now, the head of the CIA at the time was some dude named Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt. Ever heard of him? Just kidding. Roosevelt quickly seized control of the Iranian press by buying them off with bribes and circulating anti-Mossadegh propaganda. He recruited allies among the Islamic clergy, and he convinced the Shah that Mossadegh was a threat.
In early August of 1953, Iranian CIA operatives pretending to be socialists and nationalists threatened Muslim leaders with, quote, savage punishment if they opposed Mossadegh, unquote, giving the impression that Mossadegh was cracking down on dissent and stirring anti-Mossadegh sentiments within the religious community.
This sounds so familiar. Remember 2020?
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the same thing when I was reading about this.
These are bots before bots. Yeah. So on August 19th, 1953, criminals and gang members in Tehran were hired by the CIA to stage both pro-Shah and anti-Shah protests. Wow. Neither group knew that the other was being paid by the same entity, the CIA, to attack each other. They took over the streets of the city and sowed confusion and chaos. Around 300 people were killed because of the conflict, all to make it look as if Mossadegh had lost control of the city and was the source of all violence. Also, stay tuned for next week's episode on a serial killer named the CIA, because they are responsible for a lot of this.
Yeah, they are.
Wow.
Within 4 days, Mossadegh was arrested, and he was eventually tried and convicted of treason. On December 21st, 1953, he was sentenced to 3 years in jail, then placed under house arrest for the remainder of his life. Other Mossadegh supporters were imprisoned, and several received the death penalty.
Wow. So following the coup, the Shah relied heavily on United States support to hold on to his power. But his attempts at Western reforms, American policies, and repression sowed the seeds of revolution.
The Shah was perceived by many in Iran as beholden to, if not straight up a puppet of, non-Muslim Western powers whose culture was affecting that of Iran's. He alienated religious leaders with his program of modernization and westernization, and his reign was also perceived by many Iranians as oppressive, brutal, and corrupt. The British and Americans didn't care about the brutality because they still had easy access to the oil on terms that were still shitty for Iran.
Gotta make that money.
Yep, it's all about the paper.
Cash rules everything around me. Cream, get the money. That's America, baby. Yeah. And during the 1960s, Ruhollah Khomeini, better known as Ayatollah Khomeini, had called for the abolition of the Western-backed monarchy. He was sent into exile in Iraq, where he continued his opposition to the Shah.
In 1963, the Shah introduced a series of economic, social, and political reforms with the intention of transforming Iran into a global power and modernizing the nation. But the petropolitics of the 1970s, which caused world historical upheavals, also brought an end to the U.S.-Iran allyship.
The 1970s energy crisis occurred when the Western world, particularly the United States, Canada, Western Europe, Australia, and New Zealand, faced substantial petroleum shortages as well as elevated prices. Oh no. The first crisis occurred in 1973 when the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, I never knew that's what that stood for, made the decision to stop exporting oil to the United States.
2 actions by the U.S. administration caused OPEC to launch the oil embargo: when Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard and when the U.S. ordered military aid to Israel during the Yom Kippur War, a conflict between Israel and a coalition of Arab states led by Egypt and Syria.
When the U.S. was taken off of the gold standard, countries could no longer redeem U.S. dollars in their foreign exchange reserves for gold, and it also sent the value of the dollar down. This hurt OPEC countries whose oil contracts were priced in U.S. dollars. Wow, what a way to fuck people over.
Then on October 19th, 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, Nixon requested $2.2 billion from Congress in emergency military aid for Israel. The Arab members of OPEC responded by halting oil exports to the United States and other Israeli allies. OPEC continued the embargo until March 1974. By then, inflation had soared by 12% in the U.S. and up to 33% 3% in parts of Europe. So we think it's bad right now. I think
Wow.
we're at like 8%.
Yeah.
It was 12%.
It was way
yeah,
worse.
yeah.
Wow. Oh my gosh. What a mess. And it makes a lot of sense looking back, kind of where we are now.
Mhm.
Prior to all of this, Nixon had actually encouraged the Shah of Iran to raise oil prices so he could afford to buy U.S. weapons. And for 8 years, 1969 to 1977, the Shah negotiated a series of secret oil for arms deals, demanding huge OPEC hike prices. Wow, that sounds neat. Just kidding.
Then the Saudis defied OPEC with a lower oil price and flooded the market. Because of this, the U.S. sought an allyship with Saudi Arabia against Iran, and Iran's economy plummeted. The gap between rich and poor in Tehran widened.
Ayatollah Khomeini, still in exile, continued his opposition to the Shah. His opposition and influence, as well as the opposition to the Shah by other groups, plus Iran's economic difficulties, led to the 1979 Iranian Revolution, also known as the Islamic Revolution.
The revolution was not originally aimed at producing an Islamic theocracy. The Islamists loyal to Khomeini were part of a wider coalition, which included secular liberals, nationalists, communists, and Islamist Marxists. Shared antipathy towards the Shah was the glue that held these different ideologies together.
Now, what gave the Islamists the upper hand over the secular opposition was their access to a vast network of mosques and religious institutions across the country. Many people later regretted their roles in the revolution, but at the time, they couldn't see past the short-term goal of removing the Shah.
Protests began in January of 1978, which were dismissed by, well, everyone, as just a consequence of the Shah's program of liberalization. A cycle of protests, repression, violence, and mourning continued throughout the year.
By August, there were riots in Isfahan, which quickly spread to Shiraz, Qazvin, Tabriz, Abadan, and Awaz. Then, 477 Iranians died in a deliberately set fire at Cinema Rex in Abadan, which people blamed on Savak, the Iranian secret police.
By December, millions of Iranians were protesting all over the country, demanding the removal of the Shah and the return of Ayatollah Khomeini. In January of 1979, the Shah and his family left Iran for Egypt, ostensibly for vacation.
Interesting,
It wasn't really
quote
a
unquote.
vacation.
Now, no. So days after the Shah's departure, hundreds of people, including many foreigners, were desperate to leave Iran. People packed into Tehran's Mehrabad airport with the hopes of catching a flight out of the country. Was Sheila's family among these people? We don't know, but it is certainly possible.
Yeah. In February, Khomeini returned to Iran and was greeted by millions of people in the streets of Tehran. In March of 1979, a referendum to replace the monarchy with an Islamic republic passed, and Khomeini was named the Grand Ayatollah, or Supreme Leader.
Now, the new Islamic government passed a hijab law, which ordered women to wear a headscarf to leave the house. During the Shah's reign, veiling had been banned. Now it was mandatory. In both situations, women were not given a choice in the matter. That's what it's all about. I mean,
they're
being
both
able to choose.
Yeah, in both situations, they're being told what to do. They don't have a choice. Like some women might want to wear a veil, other women don't.
Yeah.
Like give them a fucking choice. Anyway.
Hello. You dudes with your dinglings get whatever choice you want.
Get the fuck out of
in
here.
any case, bye. In any case, more than 100,000 women gathered in the streets of Tehran to protest. Women from every profession took part in the enormous demonstration. I love this, which ended with them being, oh no, I don't love this, which ended with them being attacked and stabbed in the streets of Tehran.
Terrible.
No.
Yeah.
Oh man. But I admire that so many women weren't having it. Yeah.
In the fractious infighting that followed the departure of the Shah, it is estimated that at least 12,000 people were executed.
Oh my God.
People who hadn't fled the country, who were part of the Shah's regime, or who opposed the revolution were executed or held hostage. Iran became unstable with violence and repression.
Oh, man. I can't help but think, though, if America and British had minded their own
fucking business,
Would there be this instability?
Yeah.
I don't know. Iran found itself almost immediately embroiled in a long-term war with neighboring Iraq that left it economically and socially drained. And the Islamic Republic alleged support for international terrorism has left the country ostracized from the global community.
Decades later, Iranians still live under the 1979 constitution adopted as part of the Islamic Revolution. Professor Shadi Makhtari says that essentially, an authoritarian regime was replaced with a religious authoritarian regime, and the class divides of the Shah's era were replaced with new class divides.
She says, quote, sons of the revolution's leaders and the business class that decides to work within the rules of the regime, they are the upper class in Iranian society. They flaunt their wealth, driving luxury sports cars around Tehran, posting Instagram pictures of their ski trips and beach trips around the world, all while the poor and the middle class are struggling to survive or maintain the appearance of dignified life, unquote.
Mokhtari says that Iran is in social decay, with the effects of the revolution forcing people to live double lives. It has trapped them in a paradox of living one life in the confines of their homes while going through the motions of outward religiosity as a means of staying out of trouble with the government.
This is a culture corner.
Okay.
Because I saw the question pop up on Google.
Okay.
Are Iranians white? And I don't think so.
No.
But Iran is a multi-ethnic country that includes Persians, Kurds, Azerbaijani, Arabs, and others. The Iranians in the United States, where the only options are black or white or other. Ethnicities play a big role in identity, and who people really are as human beings can become erased when coming to a place where there's this binary on everything.
You're not part of the option.
Right. Yeah. So it's just something I wanted to point out.
Yeah.
Let's get into Sheila Davalloo's early life, shall
we? Go.
Okay.
So Sheila Davalloo was born on May 11th, 1969 in Iran. Her family immigrated to the United States in the late 70s to escape the chaos and violence of the Iranian Revolution. So she was born in 69, late 70s. She was still under 10 years old, so she was still a little kid. She and her parents, both medical and health professionals, settled in the New York suburb of Yorktown Heights.
After high school, Sheila, who was a gifted student, enrolled at the University of Stony Brook in New York, where she earned a degree in biochemistry.
Wow.
Okay. During this time, she married a man named Farid Mousavi. Per Sheila, this was an arranged marriage.
But her parents later said that that's not true, that Sheila wanted to marry Farid, an Iranian man who was 7 years older than her, and that they had actually been opposed to it. However, once they were married, her parents were adamant that she stay in the marriage.
After graduating from Stony Brook with a degree in biochemistry, Sheila attended graduate school at New York Medical College in Valhalla, New York. There, she met a fellow student named Paul Christos, and they began an affair.
At first, Sheila lied to Paul about her heritage, claiming that she was Italian and French, before finally admitting that she was Iranian. And I find this interesting.
Yes,
that
me
she
too.
didn't want to admit that she was Iranian. There was a lot of anti-Iran sentiment in the United States beginning in the 70s and going, I mean, to this day. Yeah.
So it makes total sense. I mean, as a way, maybe a way to protect yourself or, you know.
It makes sense.
I totally get it.
But it's interesting, I think, as part of her personality that she didn't want to admit that she was from Iran.
Yes, interesting. Okay.
So she also did not tell Paul that she was married, and he thought that she lived with her parents. That is, until one day when he received a phone call from Farid, who told him that he was Sheila's husband and that he knew about their affair.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Paul was shocked.
Yeah.
So am I. When he confronted Sheila about her lies, she told him that she was unhappy in the marriage and wanted out, but that her parents were opposed to divorce. And although Paul was upset that Sheila had lied to him, he was in love with her. so he decided to stick with her. Farid and Sheila eventually did divorce.
Farid later recounted a story about when he was still married to Sheila. He'd woken up one morning to the smell of natural gas. He jumped out of bed and
What?
ran to the kitchen to find that all of the burners on the gas stove had been turned on, and Sheila was just walking out the door. She later admitted to doing it, but claimed that she wasn't trying to kill Farid. Not trying to kill you,
Whoa.
boo. She was just
Okay.
depressed and had developed a feeling
Huh.
of being trapped, but she didn't actually know what she was doing.
Wow. Wow, that's telling.
Yeah.
Especially when we get into our takeaways. Now, Paul later said that Sheila could be emotionally volatile, sometimes overly dramatic or sensitive, bursting into hysterical crying, or reacting with extreme anger to things that he didn't understand. And it eventually became clear to him that she had a high level of secrecy in her life about her heritage and her family, among other things.
Paul and Sheila got married in 2000 and moved to Pleasantville, New York, the following year.
Oh.
Pleasantville. I bet it's
That
very,
sounds
very
wonderful.
white.
One of my favorite movies, by the way.
Is Pleasantville. Yeah, I like Pleasantville too. Yeah.
Oh, I love it.
Located about 30 miles north of Manhattan in suburban Westchester County, it was a convenient commuting distance from both their jobs.
Now, Paul was still going to school studying for his doctorate in epidemiology. Okay. And he also taught at Cornell. Okay. In New York City. Wow, these are fancy people.
Yeah.
So he was very busy. Now, Sheila was working as a research scientist at Purdue Pharma. Wow. Located in Stamford, Connecticut. Both worked long hours and spent most of their time apart.
According to Sheila, they lived more like roommates than spouses. So the relationship cooled off and Sheila became bored with it. However, her family was extremely opposed to divorce, and she knew they would be upset with her if she had yet another failed marriage.
Well, she has another thing coming for them. They are in for a surprise. Now, we are going to get into the timeline. So in the summer of 2001, Davalloo met coworker Nelson Sessler at a happy hour get-together after work. Nelson has been described as handsome, successful, charming, and a bit of a ladies' man. The ladies' man. Would you like some Cavassier? Now, they soon began an affair.
Davalloo told Nelson that she was divorced, so supposedly single. But Nelson had a girlfriend named Annalisa Raimundo. Annalisa, a Filipino-American woman, was born in Brooklyn, New York, the daughter of doctors Renato and Susan Ramos Raimundo. A beautiful and brilliant young woman, she graduated magna cum laude from Harvard University. Wow.
Wow, Harvard.
Then pursued her master's degree at Columbia University in New York.
Wow.
While in college, she volunteered at a soup kitchen and a women's center. She has been described as caring and delightful with a vibrant presence.
I just love the brown excellence
Yes,
in this episode.
yes.
I mean, we're going to get into the murder part, but
yeah,
yes, love to see it. Now, Nelson and Annalisa had also met at a happy hour, but the year prior, and the two had become a couple. During the time that Nelson and Davalloo carried on their affair, Davalloo knew about Annalisa, but Annalisa did not know about Davalloo.
Not good.
No.
Davalloo and Nelson sometimes met up at Davalloo's condominium in Pleasantville, New York. This required some subterfuge on Davalloo's part since she had told Nelson that she was divorced. Davalloo got rid of Paul on these weekends by telling him that her brother, who was schizophrenic, was coming to visit.
Wow. Now, she told Paul that her brother didn't know that she was married, and if she told him, he might react badly. Paul knew from Davalloo's parents that Davalloo did, in fact, have a mentally ill brother. So he believed Davalloo's story and would remove any trace of his existence from their home, packing up clothes, toiletries, and photographs. Before going off to spend the night or the weekend at a motel, his parents, or one of his friends' houses.
That's just wild.
That is a lot. That
Yeah.
is so much effort.
Yes, it really is. Good
wow.
grief.
Yeah.
So when Nelson would arrive to sleep over, he believed that Davalloo lived alone. But according to Nelson, he and Davalloo did not even see each other all that often because Davalloo was busy with other obligations and interests, including volleyball and taking care of her mentally ill brother.
And by the summer of 2002, Nelson had apparently lost interest in Davalloo. He committed himself to Annalisa and often stayed at her apartment in Stamford. According to Nelson, Davalloo seemed okay with their relationship just being a fling that was now over. Privately, however, Davalloo had become obsessed over Nelson.
Annalisa Raimundo left Purdue Pharma in 2002 and began a new job at another pharmaceutical company, Pharmacia, in New Jersey. Despite working in New Jersey, Raimundo continued to live at her apartment in Stamford. And I think I have to say this area, it sounds like, there's 3 different states. There's New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut. So it sounds crazy that they're living over here and working over there and all this driving around. But they're really not that far away from each other. And I think the commute from Stamford to New Jersey, where she worked, was like 45 minutes. So it's really not.
That's nothing.
Yeah. And it was the same for Pleasantville to Stamford. The commute was not really that long comparatively.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Give it up for our OG of true crime and geography expert, especially with regard to the Northeast. Yes. Now, also in 2002, Davalloo began talking to her husband, Paul, about a love triangle among 3 fictional co-workers at Purdue Pharma, Melissa, Jack, and Annalisa. She presented it as true from the perspective of her quote-unquote friend, Melissa, who supposedly was confiding in her. Wow, that's a lot.
Yeah, I know. There's a lot of work involved in all this.
The lengths these people are going.
Or that Sheila's going to. Everybody else is
Sheila
just living their
Sheila,
lives.
Are you tired, girl? Isn't this a lot of work?
Davalloo said that Melissa, who was in a relationship with Jack, was sad and depressed because Jack was also in a relationship with another woman. She included intimate details about Melissa and Jack, including how upset Melissa was when Jack rebuffed her sexual advances. Now, keep in mind, she's talking to her husband about this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So she's basically telling her husband how upset she is when her boyfriend rebuffs her sexual advances. But she's using other names, but that's what she's doing.
That's
it's crazy.
It's just so much work to keep all of this together.
Yeah.
I'm tired just thinking
about
it. Now, she also told him a story about a time when Melissa. Oh, so she's telling multiple stories.
Oh, yeah. There's story after story.
This is, wow, this is a lot. Yeah. How about talking about when the bills are going to get paid?
Or going out to dinner or something.
Dishes.
Too many crickets.
Yeah. Come on. So she also told him a story about a time when Melissa had discovered Jack's travel plans and had flown to Jack's destination. She then conveniently ran into him at the airport as he was boarding a plane home and sat next to him on the return flight. Wow. Whoa.
Paul listened to these stories to quote-unquote humor Davalloo. Paul later said, quote, during a certain time period, she would talk about this love triangle every day. She would constantly ask me why Jack would do this, what he was thinking, and what Melissa should do, unquote.
Oh, wow. No. Wow. Okay. So eventually Davalloo told Paul that she wanted to go on a stakeout with Melissa in order to spy on Jack. Although Paul thought the proposed surveillance was, quote, a little odd, unquote, he didn't really think she would do it.
But apparently, for some reason, Paul had a collection of spy gear, and he let Davalloo use his night vision binoculars. She also asked Paul for an eavesdropping device that she knew he owned, so she could help Melissa plant the device in Jack's office to listen to his conversations.
Wow.
She is doing the most.
The most. Girl. Okay. Davalloo told Paul that she had purchased a lockpick set for Melissa because Melissa wanted to break into Annalisa's apartment to look at photographs in order to, quote, get a sense of the relationship between Jack and Annalisa, unquote. Davalloo practiced with the lockpick set on the front door of their condominium. Wow.
Early one morning, Davalloo called Paul to inform him that she and Melissa were outside Annalisa's apartment and asked Paul if Melissa should confront Annalisa. Paul told Davalloo that Annalisa had a right to know that her boyfriend was cheating on her, but eventually, Paul became sick of the stories of the love triangle and, quote, kind of got angry, unquote.
Yeah.
That would be really fucking annoying. Stop talking about these people.
Can we just sit down on the couch and watch a movie and cuddle? Come on now. Let me be Big Spoon. Let me be Little Spoon. So Davalloo also related the story of the love triangle to their friends and Paul's parents. Oh, she's telling everybody.
Yeah.
She's telling on herself.
She can't stop talking
According to
about it. I think she's so obsessed. She just can't stop thinking about it or talking about it.
Yeah, this is clearly an obsession. Now, Sheila has a full-time job at Purdue Pharma in biochemistry shit. Like, she's busy. Whoa. So where does she find the time? I don't know. Davalloo also related the story of the love triangle to her friends and Paul's parents. According to friends Emilio and Tammy May, Davalloo told Tammy about Melissa almost every time they talked. And she would also ask her questions like whether or not she thought that Jack would ever break up with Annalisa and date Melissa exclusively.
Davalloo told Tammy that Melissa had access to Jack's voicemail and would listen to it on a daily basis to see if he was still seeing Annalisa or any other women. She also told Tammy that Jack, quote, tried to set Melissa up with one of his friends, unquote, but that it did not go well because, quote, Melissa just wanted to be with Jack, unquote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Several times, Davalloo asked Tammy if Melissa should confront Annalisa to let her know that she was also seeing Jack. Tammy advised against the confrontation, but sensed that Davalloo wanted her to say that Melissa should confront Annalisa.
Yeah, she just wanted confirmation.
Yeah, just tell me that it's okay to do this really terrible
because
thing.
I'm going to do it anyway.
Yeah.
On November 8th, 2002, a few minutes after 12 p.m., the Stamford Police Department received a 911 call in which a female caller reported that a man was assaulting someone at 123 Harborview, apartment 105. The caller claimed to be a neighbor.
She said, quote, I think a guy is attacking my neighbor. I don't know her name, but she's my neighbor and she lives in 105. I saw a guy go into her apartment, unquote. The caller didn't identify herself and hung up abruptly. Did you hear the call?
Yeah, I did. It's so weird. So weird.
Yeah, it's just odd.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And her voice is really strange sounding. Like, I think she's trying to disguise her voice, but she also sounds like, I don't know, like she's trying to sound like a little girl or something.
Like a kid. Yeah. Like a teenager.
Like,
that's what I thought too.
I think a guy is attacking my neighbor. Yeah. So weird.
Good Sheila impression, Beth.
So anyway, the dispatcher knew that Harborview was a commercial area without apartments and knew the given address had to be incorrect. So after the caller hung up, the dispatcher called back the number and discovered that the call had come from a payphone at the Duchess restaurant in Stamford.
The dispatcher telephoned the Duchess restaurant and spoke to a manager who had not noticed anyone at the payphone. The dispatcher then sent officers to 123 Harbor Drive, apartment 105, which she knew was a residential facility near the Duchess restaurant.
An officer knocked on the door of apartment 105 and received no answer. He then pushed the door open and saw the body of Annalisa Raimundo, 32, on the floor of the front foyer. She had been bludgeoned over the head several times and stabbed 9 times in her face, neck, and chest in a violent struggle. One puncture wound reached all the way to the back of her lung.
Oh my Lanta.
Yeah.
The apartment showed no signs of forced entry or a robbery. There was a lot of blood, which crime scene analysts took samples of. A drop of blood was lifted from the bathroom sink, which detectives believed the killer used to wash up after the attack. So the blood could belong to the killer.
According to former Stamford Police Detective Gregory Holt, quote, in an edged weapon assault or homicide, it's very common for the hand to slip off the handle or over the hilt and go down on the blade, and the perpetrator cuts themselves, unquote.
When Nelson Sessler returned after work to Annalisa's apartment, police officers questioned him. He responded calmly when informed of Annalisa's death, which raised the suspicions of investigators. While waiting to be questioned, he fell asleep, which investigators also found suspicious.
Yeah, I've heard cops say that if a suspect falls asleep, they're guilty.
Really?
Yeah, I've heard them say that because
that's not how you do police work.
Well, they're police. Come on.
Wow. Oh my God. I was listening to Wrongful Conviction today, and a cop basically admitted he pinned a guy for rape because he didn't like his attitude.
Oh my God.
And I'm just...
that is not right.
Yeah, I guess...
Yeah.
I guess that flies in some
cop
cases.
world.
So
yeah.
Yeah. Unbelievable.
Police also learned that at 11:57 a.m., the victim's home telephone had been used to place a call to Nelson Sessler's office. Nelson had not answered the call and no voice message had been left. Nelson gave officers the names of 2 other women he dated who suffered from mental illness, but he left out his relationship with Davalloo.
Uh-oh. Whoops. Now, after several hours of questioning, police released him. The police were unaware at this point of any connection between Davalloo and the crime. Nelson was eventually cleared when Stamford police reviewed security records from Purdue Pharma. The company's security cameras and extensive security system revealed that he was definitely at work when the murder took place.
Following up on the 911 caller's tip, authorities searched for a male suspect but came up with nothing. They also sought out the 911 caller, who had claimed to be one of Annalisa's neighbors. They canvassed all of the neighbors, but none of them admitted to making the call, and no neighbor in the area matched the voice recorded on the call.
Now, sometime in November of 2002, Paul noticed that Davalloo had come home from work with a nasty cut on her thumb. Davalloo explained that she had cut her thumb opening a dog food can. She had 2 dogs at the time.
On November 13th, 2002, as part of his work, Paul had a meeting with representatives from Pharmacia, where Annalisa had worked. The representatives mentioned that a colleague of theirs had recently been murdered. Although a name was not mentioned, Paul began to wonder if Melissa had done something to Annalisa.
Wow. Oh my gosh, this feels like a Dateline episode. Now, Paul mentioned to Davalloo that an employee at Pharmacia had been killed and asked whether Melissa was involved and if Annalisa was okay. Davalloo did not seem shocked or surprised and responded without elaboration that Annalisa was fine. She told Paul that Jack and Annalisa had broken up and that Melissa and Jack were together exclusively. Yay!
At some point in late 2002, Davalloo asked Paul about fingerprints and DNA. And on December 8th, 2002, during a dinner, Davalloo also asked Emilio and Tammy May about DNA and fingerprints and questioned whether, quote, they have everybody's DNA on file, unquote, and which seems really dumb.
For a biomechanical
biochemist.
Biochemist, come on now. Wow. This is surprising.
Yeah.
Wow. In early 2003, Tammy May noticed that although Davalloo continued to talk about Jack and Melissa, she had not spoken about Annalisa in a while. Tammy May asked Davalloo about Annalisa, and Davalloo responded that Annalisa had moved to New Jersey because she got a job there, and Jack and Melissa were now a happy couple. The delusions.
Yeah.
Wow. It's the delusions for me.
Boy. After Annalisa's death, Davalloo used the occasion to renew her relationship with Nelson. She sent him a care package, consoled him, and was one of the few people willing to talk to him about Annalisa at a time when most people, quote, sort of shunned him, unquote.
In January 2003, Davalloo invited Nelson to go on a group ski trip. Nelson again entered into a sexual relationship with Davalloo, and Davalloo started using the same visiting brother ruse to send Paul away when Nelson was coming over to spend the night. But Paul was getting tired of leaving whenever Davalloo's brother visited, and he told Davalloo that her brother, quote, had to be told that we're married, unquote.
Uh-oh.
Okay? Yeah. Putting his foot down. Yeah.
Yeah.
So now we're going to get into the investigation and the arrest. What the what, Beth?
On March 22nd, 2003, Davalloo told Paul about a game that she'd heard about and she wanted to try. The game involved one person being handcuffed and blindfolded, while the other placed objects against the bound person's skin. The bound person was supposed to guess what the object was.
Okay.
Right.
I like. Mama like. Now, the following day, Davalloo asked Paul if he wanted to play the guessing game, and Paul agreed to try. Davalloo was the first to be bound and blindfolded. She guessed various household items.
Then it was Paul's turn. He lay on the floor, blindfolded and handcuffed to a chair. Paul guessed various common household items before Davalloo went to the kitchen to retrieve one last item, one more thing to guess.
Oh, boy. Oh, what could it be? Whipped cream? She sat on Paul's midsection and touched the item to his face. Paul guessed the item was a candle. The item was actually a knife. Davalloo then thrust the knife into Paul's chest, paused, and then thrust it into his chest again. Paul later said that it felt like a heavy weight had struck his chest.
Wow.
Yeah, that escalated
Very quickly. Yeah. Davalloo said, quote, "Oh my God, I think I hurt you. You're bleeding," unquote. Still blindfolded and handcuffed, Paul asked Davalloo what had happened. She explained that, quote, "Something fell on you. I think the candle hurt you," unquote. Oh my God.
Whoa. Oh
I don't know what happened. Paul asked Davalloo to remove the blindfold, and she did. He saw that his shirt was soaked in blood.
Oh, he was wearing a shirt. I expected them to be totally nude.
No, actually, they've talked about this, and it wasn't actually that sexual.
Oh, I'm bummed.
Yeah.
Dang it. Well, that is disappointing. So he pleaded for Davalloo to uncuff him, but she said she lost the key. At Paul's request, Davalloo helped him break the chair to which the handcuffs were attached. She later, quote unquote, found the key and removed the handcuffs.
Paul asked Davalloo to call 911. He heard Davalloo seem to make a 911 call, but after 30 minutes passed and no ambulance arrived, Paul asked Davalloo to call 911 again. She made excuses that they're on other calls, telling him to be patient. Be patient while you're dying.
Yeah, I don't know if that's how 911 works. No. So when she seemed to finally relent and call 911 again, he asked to speak to the operator. Davalloo told Paul that the operator wanted him to lie on the floor and did not want to talk to him. What? Davalloo, that's not what they say either. Davalloo told Paul she was going to get a doctor from a nearby walk-in clinic, but she was back within 5 minutes because she said the clinic was closed and they couldn't help him. At some point during all of this, Davalloo called Nelson Sessler to invite him over to her house for dinner. What? Wait a minute. I don't know what to say. Wow.
I couldn't wait to hear you read this part.
Wow.
The audacity.
Oh, I cannot with this one. Go.
I know.
Ooh, you know me so well.
I know. Paul finally insisted that Davalloo take him to a nearby hospital. Davalloo agreed to drive her husband to the Westchester Medical Center emergency room. However, she drove slowly, and instead of driving him into the emergency entrance, she diverted to a remote parking lot at the rear of the hospital's behavioral center.
No, she did not. Wow. So Davalloo then got out of the car and opened the rear driver door where Paul was lying. Paul thought Davalloo was going to help him out of the car until he saw an angry expression on her face, and she lunged at him with the knife, stabbing him again and nicking his heart.
Yikes.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my God. Wow. Oh my God. This is
wild.
Is wild.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
This is a lot.
Yeah.
Woo.
Paul somehow managed to get out of the car and attempted to wrestle the knife out of Davalloo's hands. The melee moved to a grassy spot in the parking lot. Paul broke free, ran about 200 feet, and yelled to a medical resident and another person who were near the entrance to the behavioral health center. The resident called 911. Davalloo asked the resident to let her take Paul to the emergency room.
Oh my God.
Thankfully, the resident refused.
What did you think was going to happen? Sheila Davalloo.
Yeah.
Where did she go? What? Purdue Pharma girl.
Yeah.
Supposed to be the smartest cookie around.
No.
And this was her plan.
This was her plan.
Now,
yep.
Paul survived. Oh my God. Paul survived following open heart surgery, but police didn't tell Davalloo that. Oh no. Instead, they let her run her fucking mouth, which she did a lot of.
Yeah.
She denied having anything to do with Paul's stabbing, and she claimed that he came home with the mysterious wounds and that she had even tried to call 911 to get help.
Sure you did.
Uh-huh.
But Davalloo's story changed after she was told that Paul had survived. She began to spin different stories about what happened, including self-defense, that Paul had fallen on the knife.
Wow.
Or he'd sat up during the game, plunging his own chest into the knife twice.
Wow. Just picture that.
Just picture that. Just
is
picture that.
none of those. Wow. Now try again, Sheila. So when Nelson arrived at Davalloo's condominium for dinner. Oh, he still came for dinner. Okay. He found officers searching the residence. So this was the second time Nelson arrived somewhere only to find a crime scene. What
the hell's happening, Nelson?
What is happening? So police informed him that there had been a domestic dispute and that Davalloo's husband, Paul, was in the hospital. Nelson was shocked to learn that Davalloo was actually married. That's the shock. Nelson.
We need to talk, Nelson.
Yeah, Nelson, can I talk to you for a second? Oh my God.
By checking phone records, investigators learned that Davalloo had never called 911. Former Westchester County Police Detective Allison Carpentier, who was investigating the case, saw that Davalloo's last call was to Nelson Sussler.
When she drove to Nelson Stamford's home to talk to him about it, a neighbor asked, "Are you here about the murder?" The detective replied, "No, he didn't die. I'm here about the assault." No, the neighbor said, "She died." What?
Learning that Nelson's girlfriend had recently been murdered, police spoke with detectives working the Raimundo murder and discovered that the two cases were connected. Detective Carpentier said, quote, "When we heard the 911 tape, I said to them, that's Sheila Davalloo's voice," unquote.
Wow. Wow, they did it.
They did it.
Stamford police, contacted Paul about the death of Annalisa, and he gave them several written statements and Davalloo's phone records. Davalloo was seen in a surveillance video leaving her workplace at Purdue Pharma in Stamford at just before 11 a.m. on the day of Annalisa's murder.
While investigating the crime scene at Annalisa's murder, officers had discovered that bloodstain on the handle of the bathroom sink in her apartment. The bloodstain was later determined to contain all of the different genetic elements that were present in the DNA profiles of both Davalloo and Annalisa. Got her!
Got her! So now we're going to get into the trial. So in 2004, Davalloo was found guilty of attempted murder and assault for the stabbing of her then husband, Paul Christos. She was sentenced to the maximum of 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole.
After slowly and methodically building the case against her, authorities in Connecticut officially charged Davalloo with the murder of Annalisa Raimundo on November 21st, 2007.
Whoa.
The trial did not actually take place until 2012.
Wow, that's interesting that it took
so long
to build a case in Connecticut.
Yeah,
I Connecticut
think, I think part of it was she was already in jail. She had already been.
Oh, so they could wait.
Yeah. She wasn't going anywhere.
Right, they knew she was.
Yeah.
Right. But still, justice delayed for Annalisa's family.
Yeah, true that.
Anyway, Davalloo represented herself. It gets worse. So for hundreds of hours and for months on end, the jury was exposed to Sheila's voice. Oh no, Santa Maria. The prosecution rested on two pieces of evidence: Davalloo's voice on the 911 call on the afternoon of the murder and the blood sample taken from the bathroom sink, which came back as a match to Davalloo.
Shoring these up was evidence on the Purdue Pharma key card, which Sheila used to exit work during the middle of the day on the day of Annalisa's murder. Paul Christos also testified against Davalloo during the trial.
Good. I was also going to say, since she represented herself, she got to question everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Including Nelson, who was like, get the fuck away from me.
I'm pretty sure that's why she wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm. Now, in 2012, at 42 years old, Davalloo was found guilty of Annalisa Raimundo's murder, and she was sentenced to another 50 years in prison. So now we're going to get into, where are they now? Hit it, Beth.
Upon completing her 25-year sentence at New York's Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women, Davalloo will be transferred to a Connecticut prison to begin her 50-year sentence. Davalloo will be 60 when she begins serving the 50-year prison sentence for murdering Raimundo.
Wow.
Yeah, she's never getting out.
I don't know if she's going to make it.
She's never getting out.
Paul divorced Sheila in September 2004. He still works at Cornell and lives in New York City. He's completed his PhD and is involved in teaching and research. So now we're going to get into our takeaways and what we think made Sheila snap. What are your thoughts, Beth?
Well, first of all, I have to say that these crimes were really dumb. Really, really dumb for real.
For real.
Yeah.
To the 10th degree.
These were all very intelligent people. But with the exception of Annalisa, I think emotionally, not so much. I mean,
that's a good point.
Yeah. I mean,
That's
obviously, Davalloo was not very emotionally intelligent, but I think also Nelson and Paul, because they were just so, I don't know, easily fooled. I don't know.
Easily fooled?
Manipulated.
Love makes people do crazy things.
Yeah.
And I wonder, I was looking at Sheila, right?
Uh-huh.
And she's, I think attractive.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
She
and
is.
I don't know what Nelson and Paul look like.
They were both attractive.
They were.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I wasn't sure if it was like a nerdy guy getting attention from a really attractive
I don't think so.
woman
I
that
think
was also compelling.
Personally, I actually think Paul is more attractive than Nelson, but that's just personal opinion.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Beth.
I was like, what are you doing with this Nelson guy when you could have Paul?
When you could have Paul. Oh my gosh. But yeah, you're right. They were easily fooled, whatever the reason may be.
Yeah. Anyway, I find it interesting how Davalloo was able to manipulate both Paul and Nelson and how easily she lied.
Yeah.
It reminds me of both Jodi Arias and Casey Anthony. Like them, she lied like it was breathing to her, and everybody believed her. I think she thought that she could get away with anything she wanted to just by talking her way out of things. And her narcissism was really, really strong.
Off the Richter.
Yeah.
Off the Richter. Yeah.
But she'd also gotten away with a lot of this type of behavior in the past, which probably shored up her belief that she could.
You're right. Yeah. Built her confidence up.
And if I were a psychologist, which I'm not.
What?
I think I would suspect that she has borderline personality disorder. People with BPD have extreme mood swings, which Paul described.
Yes.
Unstable relationships. In this case, she was hopping from person to person. There was other relationships in there we didn't get into just for time constraints. But they also have trouble controlling their emotions. And obviously she had, she murdered Annalisa. That's an anger problem.
Right. Yeah. And I all the sources I referred to talked about just how brutal the
murder was.
The scene was. Yeah. Like you had to have been really mad and angry and just rage. Full of rage.
Right. And we don't really know what causes borderline personality disorder, but up to 70% of people with BPD have experienced some type of childhood abuse.
That makes
some
sense.
studies have shown it may be passed down in families. They suggest a genetic link, but I am guessing there's probably a generational trauma element as well. So,
yes, fleeing the turmoil that was existing in Iran when she came into this world, right?
So,
and then also your immigrant parents, when moving to another country is hard and traumatic, right? And then your parents just putting their nose down and working, right? Trying to be good immigrants and live the American dream. And they might not have even had enough time to devote to her transition. And emotional growth.
I believe that neglect is part of it. Yeah, because people with borderline personality disorder have a really hard time with abandonment.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yes.
So.
I did want to say about the BPD thing, though. It's treatable.
Oh, yes, it is. And most people with BPD do not do things like this.
Right. Check. Yes. I'm so glad you said that, Beth. When you know better, you do better, right?
So I've shouted it out before, but Psychology in Seattle, they talk a lot about the Kirk Honda is the psychologist, and he works with people with personality disorders a lot. Like that's kind of his specialty, and he's talked a lot
cool.
about borderline personality disorder. And so if you want to learn more about it, or if you've been diagnosed with it, he's really compassionate. And
that's
yeah,
great.
so
That's great. Yeah.
give Psychology in Seattle a listen. Anyway.
Oh, thank you. Shout outs early today.
Anyway, Davalloo still claims that she didn't kill Annalisa and that she didn't intend to hurt Paul. The attack on
What?
Yeah, that's what she says. She still claims that.
Okay, girl.
And I think the attack on Paul was really weird. Like it was in slow motion.
Yeah.
So at first I thought she didn't, like, she was hesitating to kill him. Like she didn't really want to kill him. You know, she stabbed him and then she's like, now what do I do?
Right.
But I started to think that maybe she actually wanted to watch him die.
Oh, but Paul didn't do anything
I
to
know.
her.
It's just so weird. It's really weird.
Yeah. Well, I know that part of BPD is impulsivity.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
And so that might have affected her decision making at the time. But that is, what if she did want to die slow?
It's just so
I want
weird.
her to be interviewed.
Yeah, well,
like
she was interviewed by our favorite guy, Piers Morgan.
No,
piece of
really?
Shit. Yeah.
I did not. Oh, no, he's not the guy to do it.
I watched the interview, and it wasn't really, it didn't answer any questions.
He's not good at what he does.
No.
And he's just like human clickbait. I don't know why he still is like around, but he is not as far as journalism goes, I think he's trying to be a journalist, but he's not good at it. And he does a lot of these murder shows and murder interviews. So I guess it makes sense that you saw an interview. But
I only watched it because it was the only one I could find where she was interviewed. I don't think she's given any other interviews, because I saw that and I was like, fucking Piers Morgan again. But I wanted to see what she had to say, and she really didn't say much of anything.
Yeah, he doesn't really ask that great a question.
Yeah, and he's confrontational a lot of the times, and they just get defensive, and it doesn't really. Yeah, it's not helpful.
Well, thanks for wasting Beth's time.
Thanks for wasting my time, Piers.
How dare you?
I got shit to do, Piers.
Yeah, Jesus fucking Christ, Piers. This guy over here, he stinks. So. Well, I agree. Back to Sheila being so smart. Biochemistry, bitch. Purdue Pharma, bitch. Yeah. But the crimes were real dumb.
Super dumb.
Almost like clown car-ish or like sketch comedy-ish. That last scene at the hospital where she's driving all slow. Yeah. Like it's comedic.
Oh,
it's almost
I was thinking
like
it would make a good comedy movie, you know?
Like a really dark comedy.
Yes.
A really, really dark comedy. You know, one of my favorite movies when I was a kid was Serial Mom.
Oh,
about the mom who was a serial killer.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Very dark humor.
Or that other one that's based on a true crime. I can't remember the name of it, but I think Nicole Kidman is in it.
Oh.
It was based on the teacher who had an affair.
It's a movie, not a show?
No, it's a movie. It's a comedy. It's a dark comedy. It's from like the 90s. I'll find it for you later. I'm not going to rest until I find it.
I want to know so bad. Well, anyway, it was almost like you could not. It feels like you can't write this stuff.
Yeah. It would make such a good comedy.
It would make a really, really great dark comedy. Yeah. That's going to be our next project. Is Beth and Wendy write a script? I also thought about her repeatedly not wanting to upset her Iranian parents, and we talked about the generational trauma and being a kid of an immigrant, and how that might have contributed to her mental state. And I also thought of Jodi Arias.
Right.
I think she believes she was the smartest one in the room, and you could tell as much by those interrogation tapes. And I was disappointed that this was not about BDSM.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking, I'm not here to kink shame, but I know there's a safe and consensual way to practice BDSM, but this is not it. Plunging knives into people's chests and hearts.
Yeah, not a good idea. Don't do it.
No. So, and then it seemed like a lot of time went by before they realized about the murder of Annalisa or were really, really working on it. Like, I feel like the connection could have been made much sooner.
It would have been made much sooner if Nelson had told them about Davalloo, but he didn't.
They were checking things like surveillance tapes, right? That just seems like something they would get on sooner. Surveillance tapes of the apartment. And I only bring that up to say Annalisa was a woman of color.
Oh, right.
So maybe there was less of a priority on her death. Yeah. So anyway, that's my take.
Gotcha.
Now it's time to talk about how not to get murdered. So first, step one, stay away from Sheila Davalloo. Now, if you love true crime and you don't want to die, here's a tip for you.
This segment is not intended to be victim blaming. We thought of this segment because I read somewhere that a lot of people listen to true crime because they want to know what they can do to be safer. This is not meant to blame the victims. It's just learning from other people's experiences.
So we are transitioning over here. Some big things happening over at Fruitloops. We would like you to help us out and send us your how not to get murdered tips.
Yeah.
Also, just want to say, practice a little self-care. Be kind to yourselves so you don't feel like murdering someone.
Yeah, great idea.
Okay, it's shout out time where we shout out any content by people of color, marginalized, minoritized folks, or any true crime goodies. So I just wanted to shout out Stolen Season 3, Surviving St. Michael's. I can't remember if I shouted this out before, but my love for it was rekindled. So it's investigative journalist Connie Walker. She found out about a story of her father and the abuse he encountered while in residential school. And the priest is still alive.
Oh my God.
She interviews him.
Holy shit.
It's and she also interviews several other Indigenous people in her community who encountered these abusers and just people who suffered at the hands of the government and the church at these residential schools and all the legacy of, generational trauma passed down. Yeah. I also wanted to say, watch the trailer for The Little Mermaid, the new Black Little Mermaid, over and over again, and watch all the reactions.
I love the reactions.
Kids of all colors.
It's beautiful.
But particularly with Black kids, it will make you feel really good. And if you wonder, why is representation so important?
That's why. Yeah.
It's like Zoloft for your eyeballs.
Yeah, it's really touching.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. What do you got?
Well, I got a true crime goodie.
Hell yeah.
Speaking of crazy bitches. Sins of Our Mother on Netflix dropped this week. It's the Lori Vallow Daybell story. White people all around, lots of snow.
Lots of snow.
But I am fascinated by this story.
Yeah. So. Well, you're fascinated. I mean, it's kind of the story that keeps on giving.
Yeah,
there was something in the news just last week about this family. Yeah. So I will be watching it.
I love a story about a crazy bitch. So don't ask me why.
Hell yeah. Okay.
It could be a crazy dude. I just love these stories.
Or a crazy they.
Yeah, or a crazy they, a crazy anybody. Yeah.
Amen.
Just love it. I don't know why.
Crazy's my favorite flavor. So that's Stolen Season 3, Surviving St. Michael's, as well as the trailer for the new Little Mermaid, as well as Sins of Our Mother on Netflix.
And then we also used an episode of Throughline for the history part of this story. And I think we've shouted it out before, but if not, Throughline is a historical podcast which aims to contextualize current events by exploring the historical events that contributed to them. So give it a listen if you haven't yet.
And the hosts are people of color, including a young man from, I believe, Iran.
Yeah.
So
there you go.
It was very illuminating. fascinating.
Yes.
So that's also Throughline.
Yep.
Well, that's all for today. Where can the people find us, Beth?
Our website is fruitloopspod.com, and we use Fruit Loops Pod for all of our social media. Join our discussion group on Facebook at Fruit Loops Pod Discussion. If you want to support the show, you can send us a donation on the Cash App. Just Google Fruit Loops Pod Cash App, or you can become a monthly patron through Patreon. And as always, we have merch for sale on our website.
Yes, now this is a weekly podcast, and new episodes drop every Thursday. So until next time, look alive, y'all. It's crazy out there.